The silence that followed Marcus Reed's words did not feel like ordinary quiet. It felt heavy, almost alive, pressing against Naomi Carter's chest as she held the phone tighter than she realized. The voice she had never expected to hear again echoed through decades of buried pain. Every memory of abandonment suddenly resurfaced at once, uninvited and sharp. She could almost hear the hospital doors closing, the childhood silence returning. On the other end, there was no apology waiting, only need. That difference struck harder than anything else. And for the first time in years, Naomi could not find words. Marcus repeated himself again, as though desperation might soften truth. He said he needed help, not forgiveness, not healing, only survival. Those words revealed more than he intended. They exposed a lifetime of selfishness now stripped of pride. Naomi listened, frozen between anger and disbelief. The man who once refused her existence now clung to it for rescue. And yet, not once did he say he was sorry. When the call ended, silence filled Naomi's space again. But this silence was different from childhood silence. This one was louder, heavier, filled with unfinished questions. She sat still, staring at nothing as memories collided in her mind. The hospital, the door shutting, her mother's tears all returned vividly. And somewhere beneath it all was a question she thought she had buried. Why now? Days passed, but the calls did not stop. Different voices came through the line, all carrying the same message. Family members who once ignored her existence now spoke urgently. They spoke of responsibility, of blood, of duty as though it erased history. Each call added another layer of pressure she did not ask for. Yet none of them acknowledged what had been taken from her. Only Marcus's suffering seemed to matter now. They explained that Marcus Reed was no longer the man he used to be. A sudden stroke had weakened his body and slowed his voice. The once commanding figure of authority now depended on others to survive. His business had collapsed long before his health followed. Friends had disappeared when his wealth disappeared. And the son he once desired had also turned his back on him, leaving him exactly where he once left someone else. Life had finally mirrored his decisions with painful precision. The man who once walked away from a newborn child now struggled to walk at all. The same pride that once filled his voice had been stripped away completely. Now there was only weakness where certainty used to live. But even in ruin, history could not be rewritten. Every consequence felt intentional, as though time had been waiting. And Naomi found herself watching a life collapse she no longer recognized. What troubled her most was not what was said. It was what was left unsaid by everyone around her. No one mentioned the years of absence. No one spoke about Evelyn's suffering or her childhood loneliness. The narrative had shifted, as if pain only mattered when it was his. That imbalance reopened wounds she thought had healed. And Naomi began to understand how selective memory could be. Each conversation ended with the same expectation. Help him. Forgive him. He is still your father. As though a title could erase decades of silence. As though biology alone could replace presence and love. Naomi heard those words repeatedly until they lost meaning. Yet behind them, pressure continued to build. Until silence became her only answer. Inside her, old emotions began to rise again. Anger, confusion, and unresolved grief returned like buried storms. She remembered every moment she asked why she was unwanted. Every school event where she looked for someone who never came. Every night her mother tried to protect her from truth. Those memories did not fade easily. They only waited. One morning, Naomi made a decision she did not announce. It was not driven by forgiveness or revenge. It was driven by the need for truth. A truth she could only find by seeing him herself. Not through voices on a phone or stories from relatives, but face to face, where silence could not lie. And so she prepared to go. The journey to Marcus Reed's address felt unreal. Every road seemed familiar yet distant at the same time. Buildings passed slowly, as if time itself had weakened. Her thoughts moved faster than the car carrying her forward. She replayed memories she had tried to bury for years. Each mile felt like stepping deeper into unfinished history. Until finally, she arrived. The house she saw was not what she imagined. It stood quiet, almost forgotten, stripped of former pride. No energy of dominance remained within its walls. Only stillness and decline surrounded it now. It looked smaller than memory had ever allowed her to believe. And for a moment, she hesitated at the entrance, as if stepping inside meant entering the past itself. When she finally entered, the air felt heavier than expected. Inside, Marcus Reed sat in a wheelchair near a dim window. The light from outside barely touched his face. Time had reshaped him into something unfamiliar. No longer powerful, no longer feared, only fragile. The sight forced Naomi to pause without speaking. For the first time, anger had nowhere to land. Neither of them spoke at first. The silence stretched between them like a long history. Years of absence filled the room without permission. Every second felt like a conversation neither had prepared for. Naomi studied him carefully, searching for something recognizable. But all she saw was decline and regret. And still, neither broke the silence. Then Marcus finally looked up. His eyes carried exhaustion, weakness, and something deeper. Recognition mixed with disbelief filled his expression, as though he had not expected reality to answer his call. His lips trembled before he spoke. And when he did, it was only her name. Soft, uncertain, almost broken. Naomi did not respond immediately. She stood still, absorbing the moment fully. The name she once waited to hear now felt unfamiliar. Not comforting, not healing, only distant. It came from a man she barely knew anymore. A man who had once been everything and nothing at the same time. And silence became her answer. Marcus lowered his gaze again, unable to hold hers. The weight of the past seemed too heavy for his voice. Every breath he took felt slower than the last. Yet he remained there, unable to escape the moment. As if time had finally cornered him. And there was no longer anywhere to hide. Only truth remained. After what felt like an eternity, he began to speak. His voice cracked with age and regret. He admitted he had been wrong in ways that could not be measured. Not just mistaken, but deeply destructive. Each word carried the sound of surrender. And for the first time, he did not try to defend himself. He only confessed. He spoke of pride, expectations, and foolish dreams. Of believing a son would validate his worth in the world. Of chasing an idea so strongly he ignored reality. His voice weakened as he continued. Every sentence revealed deeper regret. Until even he seemed surprised by his own honesty. And still, Naomi said nothing. The confession continued, slower now, heavier. He admitted that his decisions destroyed everything he valued. That rejection had cost him far more than he understood at the time. His legacy had not survived pride. Only emptiness remained where certainty once lived. And in that emptiness, truth finally settled. Too late to change anything. Naomi listened carefully without interruption. Not because she was forgiving, but because she needed clarity. She wanted to hear every word without distortion. To understand how someone could erase a child so easily. Each sentence added weight to her understanding. And yet none of it removed the pain. It only explained it. When he finally stopped speaking, silence returned again. This time, it felt final. No excuses remained, no defenses left standing. Only two people facing the ruins of time. Marcus waited for judgment that did not come immediately. Naomi simply stood, absorbing everything she had heard. And the silence stretched again. He lowered his head slowly, unable to face her. The strength he once carried had completely disappeared. What remained was humility shaped by consequence. He seemed smaller than ever before, as though life had finally reduced him to truth. And that truth was irreversible, no matter what followed. Then Naomi spoke at last. Her voice was steady but carried years of weight. She asked why it took losing everything to see clearly. Why love only appeared after destruction. The question hung in the air without mercy. There was no comfort in it. Only honesty. Marcus had no answer that could survive the question. His silence was louder than words could be. Regret filled the space between them completely. And for the first time, he understood there was no explanation left. Only consequences that had already been lived. No future could undo the past. Only witness it. In the following weeks, Naomi returned occasionally. Not often enough to rebuild anything. but enough to observe what remained of him. Each visit revealed further decline, and yet also revealed a quiet shift in understanding. She was no longer chasing answers alone. She was observing history. What she discovered surprised her deeply. There was no monster behind the wheelchair, only a man destroyed by his own choices. Weakness had replaced pride completely, and ignorance had been replaced by regret. But understanding him did not erase her pain. It only placed it in perspective. Pain remained, but it no longer controlled her. It existed like a memory, not a prison. She began to see the difference between explanation and excuse, between understanding and forgiveness. And though both existed in the same space, they were not equal. One healed, the other simply clarified. And Naomi held both carefully. Cinematic Black American folktale illustration. Marcus calling Naomi closer from his wheelchair. Weakened appearance. Emotional final conversation setting. One evening, Marcus asked her to come closer. His voice barely carried across the room. Every breath seemed fragile and uncertain. Yet the request carried urgency beneath weakness. Naomi moved slowly, unsure of what would follow. The past felt closer than ever in that moment. And silence waited again. He confessed he did not deserve forgiveness. The words were no longer prideful or defensive. They were acceptance of consequence. A final acknowledgement of irreversible damage. His eyes no longer searched for excuses. Only peace, however late it had arrived. And the room grew still. Naomi studied him quietly for a long time. The man before her no longer matched her memories. Time had rewritten everything she once feared. And yet recognition still lingered beneath the surface. He was both stranger and origin at once. And that contradiction weighed heavily in her silence. Until she finally responded inwardly. She told him the truth that changed everything. Forgiveness had already existed long before that moment. It had simply never been spoken aloud. Carried quietly through years of healing and distance. Silence had hidden it, not absence. And now it finally surfaced. Without ceremony. Marcus broke down completely upon hearing this. Years of regret collapsed into visible emotion. No control remained in his expression. Only raw acknowledgement of what could not be changed. He wept without pride, without resistance. And for once, nothing stopped it. Not even ego. Something shifted in that moment between them. Not repair, not restoration, but release. The burden of silence began to loosen. Pain was not erased, but it was no longer alone. Both father and daughter existed in truth together. Not as what they wanted, but what remained. And that was enough. Months later, Marcus Reed passed away quietly. No grand moment marked his departure. Only stillness where struggle had been. His story ended without celebration or redemption. Just the closing of a long, complicated life. And the silence he left felt final. Like a chapter closing. The funeral remained small and restrained. People spoke carefully about his life's contradictions. Some remembered success, others remembered failure. But no single version captured the whole truth. Each voice told only fragments. And none could fully define him. Not even at the end. When Naomi stood to speak, the room became silent. All attention shifted toward her without hesitation. She carried no anger in her posture. Only calm understanding shaped by experience. Her presence alone changed the atmosphere. And even grief seemed to pause. Waiting for her words. She spoke carefully, choosing every word with intention. Not to defend him, nor to condemn him, but to acknowledge what had been learned. That pain can shape lives in irreversible ways. And choices echo far beyond intention. Her voice remained steady throughout, even when emotions lingered. She explained that rejection can destroy families silently. But regret, when it arrives too late, cannot repair what is gone. It can only observe the damage it created, and learn from what remains. Her words carried weight beyond the room, settling into every listener deeply, without resistance. As she left the funeral that day, Naomi understood something fully. Her story was not defined by abandonment alone, nor by success alone. but by what she chose to become after both. She did not inherit bitterness from the past. She transformed it into strength instead. And in doing so, she finally became free.